My name is Anne Hollonds. I was the National Children's Commissioner from 2020 to 2025. One of the most important pieces of work I was privileged to be able to do in that role resulted in a report to Parliament. It's called Help Way Earlier. This was the culmination of a very large investigation of the international evidence available on what will prevent crime by children, as well as speaking with over 150 children who were at that time in youth detention centres around Australia. So the voices of the children and young people come through as a very important part of this report.
If a child ends up in youth detention, it's because they're dangerous and beyond help.
So this is an interesting myth. The truth is that far too many children are being detained because the laws have been changed to make it really hard to get bail. And so we have something around 85-95% of kids who end up in detention are on remand, and they haven't been before a court. They haven't been sentenced. They're just being held because they couldn't get bail or because there was nowhere safe to send them while they were on bail.
Solitary confinement is only used for the worst kids who can't be controlled in any other way.
We're detaining kids because there's no safe place to send them. That's a fault of our society. Putting them in solitary confinement is like the worst thing you can do because they're already traumatized. These kids have multiple disabilities. They've been maltreated earlier in their lives. They're often victims of crime themselves. And then if we detain them, typically on remand, then we are enacting further abuse on children who have already suffered greatly prior to their detention.
Solitary confinement is just like sending a kid to their room. There is nothing torturous about it.
So this could not be further from the truth. In international conventions that Australia has ratified, that solitary confinement of children is regarded as cruel, inhumane and degrading treatment. It is absolutely a breach of human rights. These are children in need of care and protection, and solitary confinement actually is just harming them further.
Do adult crime, do adult time.
So this is an interesting development in some of the states and territories taking a very hard-line approach, and it really goes right against all of our obligations under the Convention on the Rights of the Child and other international conventions, which have a number of elements in them. For example, the best interests of children should be our primary consideration. Detention should be a last resort when it comes to children. I was really shocked to be told by international experts that Australia was the only country in the world that had ever removed detention as a last resort for children. That direction that has been taken by some state and territory governments flies right against all the human rights conventions that we've signed up to, but it also goes against the evidence of what works to prevent crime by children.
Being tough on kids in detention keeps the community safe.
We've got to understand kids are part of the community. We've also got to start to look at the evidence from all around the world. That shows that the younger you lock up a child, the more likely it is that they are going to go on to commit more crimes, and in fact, worse crimes, more violent crimes. And so if we want to prevent crime by children, ideally before it happens, we have to take the opposite approach. We have to stop them sliding into the criminal justice system, and we need to find other ways of helping these children with multiple complex needs much, much earlier.
Locking up kids helps them learn discipline.
So again, that is not based on any evidence. In fact, I talked to over 150 children in prisons around Australia for the Help Way Earlier project, and they told me that what they learn in detention is how to do more crime. They're learning it from other kids, older kids, more hardened children. And so actually locking up children is essentially we're training them to be worse criminals later, which goes right against what the public wants and what the public asked for when they voted in those state and territory governments on a law and order platform, they want the governments to act to prevent crime before it happens. They're not looking at the evidence and they're going in the opposite direction of what will achieve that.
Solitary confinement protects children from harming themselves or others.
So, solitary confinement is often used as a tool of convenience for operational reasons. They haven't got enough staff to manage all the kids. And of course, there's more and more kids now in detention in some of these jurisdictions. In some states, it's called night mode or just a lockdown. And while the kids are in there, alone in their cells, they are getting no education, no rehabilitation, no recreation, all of these things which are their human rights under the Convention on the Rights of the Child. So we are treating them in ways that are further damaging kids who have come from trauma.
Most kids in youth detention are beyond help.
This is incorrect. The majority of kids actually are there on remand. They haven't even been sentenced for anything. Detention should be a last resort for children. That's an international convention that Australia signed up to. We have started to use detention just more as a management tactic to try to get kids off the streets because we've been unable to find other ways of managing them, unlike other countries. So Australia really lags when it comes to more effective ways to get in early to prevent crime before it happens. So, this is not about being soft on kids. In fact, it's about being realistic and evidence-based. We've got to get in earlier to address the unmet needs of these children. What we found in the Help Way Earlier report that was tabled in Parliament in 2024 is that crime by children is a symptom of their unmet needs and of their underlying issues that as a society we have failed to address.
The needs of victims of crime matter more than the needs of children who offend.
So, of course, we care about victims of crime. I've spoken to many victims of crime, many advocates for victims of crime. What I've been told is they don't want to just lock up more children. What they want is for the government to take action that will prevent crime by children before it happens. Kids, when they're out, on the streets because they're trying to find a tribe to belong to, a sense of connection and belonging that they haven't been able to get at school, haven't been able to get at home. When they're out there at 2 a.m., they're not thinking, oh, how long will my sentence be? Will I steal this car or won't I steal this car? I mean, it's a ridiculous proposition. The kids are doing this because they've got needs that have not been met in other ways.
This is a state issue. The federal government can't get involved.
Well, under the Federation Division of Responsibilities, justice is technically a state and territory responsibility. However, Australia as a whole nation ratified the Convention on the Rights of the Child as well as other international conventions, and the states and territories were consulted in 1990. When we have national problems, domestic, family and sexual violence is a typical example where it is occurring in every state and territory. All state and territory governments are struggling to deal with this problem. There's a national plan, everyone is part of it, everybody works together. Youth justice is an outlier here. It is a problem in every state and territory to a greater or a lesser degree, but for reasons that have not been fully explained, the Commonwealth Government has to date taken a hands-off approach to this, and unfortunately that has left Australia with a whole series of different approaches in the states and territories which are largely not working. We need to make the safety and well-being of children a national priority at National Cabinet, which is where the states and territories work together with the Commonwealth. Australia is a smart and rich country. We've been able to address a whole lot of issues that are of importance to this country. We can do this one too. Lack of knowledge is not our problem. Our problem in Australia is a lack of accountability for action on the knowledge that we have. Essentially, we know what to do. And the Help Way Earlier report, which was tabled in Parliament in 2024, that is basically the foundation of a roadmap for reform. And I encourage all governments to look at the evidence in this Help Way Earlier report.